This is the 48 Laws of Power, Law 6. Court attention at all cost. Everything is changed, everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd, then or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous at all cost. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. Part 1. Surround your name with the sensational and scandalous. Draw attention to yourself by creating an unforgettable, even controversial image. Court scandal. Do anything to make yourself seem larger than life and shine more brightly than those around you. Make no distinction between kinds of attention. Notoriety, or of any sort, will bring you power. Better to be slandered and attacked than ignored. Observance of the law. P.T. Barnum, America's premier 19th century showman, started his career as an assistant to the owner of his circus, Aaron Turner. In 1836, the circus stopped in Annapolis, Maryland, for a series of performances. On the morning of the opening day, Barnum took a stroll through the town, wearing a new black suit. People started to follow him. Someone in the gathering crowd shouted that he was the Reverend Ephraim K. Avery, infamous as a man acquitted of the charge of murder, but still believed guilty by most Americans. The angry mob tore off Barnum's suit and was ready to lynch him. After desperate appeals, Barnum finally convinced them to follow him to the circus, where he could verify his identity. Once there, old Turner confirmed that this was all a practical joke. He himself had spread the rumor that Barnum was Avery. The crowd dispersed. Barnum, who had nearly been killed, was not amused. He wanted to know what could have induced his boss to play such a trick. "My dear Mr. Barnum," Turner replied, "it was all for our good. Remember, all we need is to ensure success is notoriety." And indeed everyone in town was talking about the joke, and the circus was packed that night, and every night it stayed in Annapolis. Barnum had learned a lesson he would never forget. Barnum's first big venture of his town was the American Museum, a collection of curiosities located in New York. One day a beggar approached Barnum in the street. Instead of giving him money, Barnum decided to employ him, taking him back to the museum. He gave the man 5 bricks and told him to make a slow circuit of several blocks. At certain points, he was to lay down a brick on the sidewalk, always keeping 1 brick in hand. On the return journey, he was to replace each brick on the street with one he held. Meanwhile, he was to remain serious of consonants and answer no questions. Once back in the museum, he was to enter, walk around inside, then leave through the back door and make the same bricklaying circuit again. On the first man's walk through the street, several hundred people watched his mysterious movements. By his 4th circuit, onlookers swarmed around him, debating what he was doing. Every time he entered the museum, he was followed by people who bought tickets to keep watching him. Many of them were distracted by the museum's collections and stayed inside. By the end of the first day, the brick man had drawn over 1,000 people to the museum. A few days later, the police ordered him to cease and desist from his walks, and the crowds were blocking traffic. The bricklayer stopped with thousands of New Yorkers and entered the museum. Many of those had become P.T. Barnum converts. Barnum would put a band of musicians on a balcony overlooking the street, beneath a huge banner proclaiming free music for the millions. What generosity, New Yorkers thought, and they flocked to free concerts, but Barnum took pains to hire the most worst musicians he could find, and soon after the band struck up, people would hurry to buy tickets to the museum, where they would be out of earshot of the band's noise and of the booing of the crowd. One of the first oddities Barnum toured around the country was Joyce Heth, a woman he claimed was 161 years old, and whom he had advertised as a slave who had once been George Washington's nurse. After several months, the crowds began to dwindle, so Barnum sent an anonymous letter to the papers, claiming that Heth was a clever fraud. Joyce Heth, he wrote, is not a human being, but an automaton, made of a whalebone, india rubber, and numberless springs. Those who had not bothered to see her before were immediately curious, and those who had already seen her paid her to see her again, to find out whether the rumor that she was a robot was true. In 1842, Barnum purchased the carcass of what was purported to be a mermaid. This creature resembled a monkey with the body of a fish, but the head and body were perfectly joined. It was truly a wonder. After some research, Barnum discovered this creature had been expertly put together in Japan, where the hoax had caused quite a stir. He nevertheless planted articles in newspapers around the country claiming the capture of a mermaid in the Fiji Islands. He also sent the papers woodcut prints of paintings showing mermaids. By the time he showed the specimen in the museum, a national debate had been sparked over the existence of these mystical creatures. A few months before Barnum's campaign, no one had cared or even known about the mermaids. Now everyone was talking about them as if they were real. Crowds flocked to the record numbers to see Fiji Mermaid and hear the debates on the subject. A few years later, Barnum toured Europe with the General Tom Thumb, a 5-year-old dwarf from Connecticut whom Barnum claimed was an 11-year-old English boy and whom he had trained to do many remarkable acts. During this tour, Barnum's name attracted such attention that Queen Victoria, that paragon of sobriety, requested a private audience with him and his talented dwarf at the Buckingham Palace. The English press may have ridiculed Barnum, but Victoria was royally entertained by him and respected him ever after. Interpretation. Barnum understood the fundamental truth about attracting attention. Once people's eyes are on you, you have a special legitimacy. For Barnum, creating interest meant creating a crowd. As he later wrote, every crowd has a silver lining, and crowds tend to act in conjunction. If one person stops to see your beggarman laying bricks in the street, more will do the same. They will gather like dust bunnies. Then, given a gentle push, they will enter your museum or watch your show. To create a crowd, you have to do something different and odd. Any kind of curiosity will serve the purpose, for crowds are magnetically attracted by the unusual and inexplicable. And once you have their attention, never let it go. If it veers toward other people, it does so at your expense. Barnum would ruthlessly suck attention from his competitors, knowing what a valuable commodity it is. At the beginning of your rise to the top, then spend all of your energy on attracting attention. Most important, the quality of the attention is relevant. No matter how badly his shows were reviewed or how slanderously people were the attacks on his hoaxes, Barnum would never complain. If a newspaper critic reviled him particularly badly, in fact, he made sure to invite the man to an opening and to give him the best seat in the house. He would even write anonymous attacks on his own work, just to keep his name in the papers. From Barnum's vantage, attention, whether negative or positive, was the main ingredient of his success. The worst fate in the world for a man who yearns fame, glory, and of course power, is to be ignored. Quote, if the courtier happens to engage in arms in some public spectacle, such as jousting, he will ensure that the horse he has beautifully caparisoned, that he himself is suitably attired, with appropriate mottoes and ingenious devices to attract the eyes of onlookers in his direction as surely as the loathsome attracts iron. Keys to power. Burning more brightly than those around you is a skill no one is born with. You have to learn to attract attention. As surely as the lodestone attracts iron, at the start of your career you must attach your name and reputation to a quality, an image that sets you apart from other people. This image can be something like a characteristic style of dress, or a personality quirk that amuses people and gets talked about. Once the image is established, you have an appearance, a place in the sky for your star. It is a common mistake to imagine that this particular appearance of yours should not be controversial, that to be attacked is somehow bad. Nothing could be further from the truth. To avoid being a flash in the pan and having your notoriety eclipsed by another, you must not discriminate between different types of attention. In the end, every kind will work in your favor. Barnum, we have seen, welcomed personal attacks and felt no need to defend himself. He deliberately courted the image of being a humbug. The court of Louis XIV contained many talented writers, artists, great beauties, and men and women in impeccable virtue. But no one more talked about the singular Duc de Luzun. The Duke was short, almost dwarfish, and he was prone to the most insolent kinds of behavior. He slept with the king's mistress, and openly insulted not only other courtiers but the king himself. Louis, however, was so beguiled by the Duke's eccentricities that he could not bear his absences from the court. It was simple. The strangeness of the Duke's character attracted attention. Once people were enthralled by him, they wanted him around at any cost. Society craves larger-than-life figures, people who stand above the general mediocrity. Never to be afraid, then, of the qualities that set you apart in general draw attention to you. Court controversy, even scandal, it is better to be attacked, even slandered, than ignored. All professions are ruled by this law, and all the professionals must have a bit of showman about them. The great scientist Thomas Edison knew that to raise money he had to remain in the public eye at any cost. Almost as important as the inventions themselves was how he presented them to the public and courted attention. Edison would design visually dazzling experiments to display his discovery with electricity. He would talk about the future inventions that seemed fantastic at the time, robots, and machines that could photograph thought, and that he had no intention of wasting its energy on, but that made the public talk about him. He did everything he could to make sure that he received more attention than his great rival, Nikola Tesla, who may actually have been more brilliant than he was, but whose name was far less known. In 1915, it was rumored that Edison and Tesla would be joint recipients of the year's Nobel Prize in Physics. The prize was eventually given to a pair of English physicists, only later it was discovered that the prize committee had actually approached Edison, but he had turned them down, refusing to share the prize with Tesla. By that time, his fame was more secure than Tesla's, and he thought it better to refuse the honor than allow his rival the attention that would have come even sharing the prize. If you find yourself in a lowly position that offers little opportunity for you to draw attention, an effective trick is to attack the most visible, most famous, most powerful person you can find. When Pietro Etro, a young Roman servant boy of the early 16th century, wanted to get attention as a writer of verses, he decided to publish a series of satirical poems ridiculing the Pope and his affection for a pet elephant. The attack put Ereto in the public eye immediately. A slanderous attack on a person in the position of power would have a similar effect. Remember, however, use such tactics sparingly after you have the public's attention, when the act can wear thin. Once in the limelight, you must consistently renew it by adapting and varying your method of courting attention. If you don't, the public will grow tired, it will take you for granted, and will move on to the newer star. The game requires constant vigilance and creativity. Pablo Picasso never allowed himself to fade in the background. If his name was too attached to a particular style, he would deliberately upset the public with a new series of paintings that went against all expectations. Better to create something ugly and disturbing, he believed, than to let viewers grow too familiar with his work. Understand, people feel superior to the person whose actions they can predict. If you show them who is in control by playing against their actions, you both gain their respect and tighten your hold on their fleeting attention. Image, the limelight. The actor who steps into this brilliant light attains a heightened presence. All eyes are on him. There is room for only one actor at a time in the limelight's narrow beam. Do whatever it takes to make yourself its focus. Make your gestures so large, amusing, and scandalous that the light stays on you while other actors are left in the shadows. Authority. Be ostentatious, and be seen. What is not seen is as though it does not exist. And was light the first caused all creation to shine forth? Display fills up so many blanks, covers up deficiencies, and gives everything a second life, especially when it is backed by genuine merit. Baltasar Gracian. Part 2. Create an air of mystery. In a world growing increasingly banal and familiar, what seems enigmatic instantly draws attention. Never make it too clear what you are doing or about to do. Do not show all your cards. An air of mystery heightens your presence. It also creates anticipation. Everyone will be watching you to see what happens next. Use mystery to beguile, seduce, even frighten. Sorry. Observance of the law. Beginning in 1905, rumors started to spread throughout Paris of a young Oriental girl who danced in a private home. Wrapped in veils that she gradually discarded, a local journalist who had seen her dancing reported that a woman from the Far East who had come to Europe laden with perfume and jewels to introduce some of the richness of the Oriental color and life that satiated society of the European cities. Soon everyone knew about the dancer's name, Mata Hari. Earlier that year in the winter, a small and select audience would gather in a salon filled with Indian statues and other relics, while an orchestra played music inspired by Hindu and Javanese melodies. After keeping the audience waiting and wondering, Matahari would suddenly appear in a jeweled band at the waist supporting a sarong that revealed as much as it concealed, bracelets up the arms. Then Matahari would dance in a style no one in France had seen before, her whole body swaying as if she were in a trance. She told her excited and curious audience that her dances told stories from Indian mythology and Japanese folk tales. Soon the cream of Paris and ambassadors from far-off lands were competing for invitations to the salon, where it was rumored that Matahari was actually performing sacred dances in the nude. The public wanted to know more about her. She told journalists that she was actually Dutch in origin, but had grown up in the island of Java. She would also talk about the time she spent in India. She had learned the sacred Hindu dances there and how Indian women can shoot straight, ride horseback, and are capable of doing logarithms and talk philosophy. By the summer of 1905, although few Parisians had actually seen Matahari dance, her name was on everyone's lips. As Matahari gave more interviews, the story of her origins kept changing. She had grown up in India. Her grandmother was the daughter of a Japanese princess. She had lived on the island of Sumatra, where she had spent her time horseback riding, gun in hand, and risking her life. No one knew anything about her, anything certain about her, but journalists did not mind these changes in her biography. They compared her to an Indian goddess, a creature from the pages of Baudelaire. Whatever their imagination wanted to see in this mysterious woman from the East. In August 1905, Matahari performed for the first time in public. Crowds thronging to see her on the opening night caused a riot. She had now become a cult figure, spawning many imitations. One reviewer wrote, Matahari personifies all the poetry of India, its mysticism, its voluptuous, its hypnotizing charm. Another noted, if India possesses such unexpected treasures, then all Frenchmen would immigrate to the shores of the Ganges. Soon the fame of Matahari and her sacred Indian dances spread beyond Paris. She was invited to Berlin, Vienna, Milan. Over the next few years, she performed throughout Europe, mixed the brightest social circles, and earned an income that gave her an independence rarely enjoyed by a woman of the period. Then, near the end of World War I, she was arrested in France, tried, convicted, and finally executed as a German spy. Only during the trial did the truth come out. Matahari was not from Java or India. She had not grown up in Orient, did not have a drop of Eastern blood in her body. Her real name was Margaretha Zell. She came from the stolid northern province of Friesland, Holland. Interpretation. When Margaretha Zell arrived in Paris in 1904, she had half a franc in her pocket. She was one of thousands of beautiful young girls who would flock to Paris every year, taking work as an artist's model, nightclub dancers, or vaudeville performers at the Folie Bergeau. After a few years, they would inevitably be replaced by younger girls, and would often end up on the streets, turning to prostitution, or else returning to their town they came from, older and chastened. Zell had higher ambitions. She had no dance experience and never performed in the theater, but as a young girl she had traveled with her family and witnessed local dances in Java and Sumatra. Zell clearly understood that what was important in her act was not the dance itself, or even her face or figure, but her ability to create an air of mystery about herself. The mystery she created lay not just in her dancing, or her costumes, or the stories she would tell, or the endless lies about her origins. It lay in an atmosphere enveloping everything she did. There was nothing you could say for sure about her. She was always changing, always surprising her audience with new costumes, new dances, new stories. This air of mystery left the public always wanting to know more, always wondering about her next move. Matahari was no more beautiful than many of the other young girls who came to Paris, and she was not a particularly good dancer. What separated her from the mass, what attracted and held the public's attention, and made her famous and wealthy, was her mystery. People are enthralled by mystery because it invites constant interpretation, and they never tire of it. The mysterious cannot be grasped, and what cannot be seized and consumed creates power. Keys to power. In the past, the world was filled with the terrifying unknowable, diseases, disasters, capricious depots, and the mystery of death itself. What we could not understand, we reimagined as myth and spirits. Even over the centuries though, we have managed, through science and reason, to illuminate the darkness. What was mysterious and foreboding has grown familiar and comfortable, yet this light has a price. In a world that is ever more banal, that has had its mystery and myth squeezed out of it, we secretly crave enigmas, people or things that cannot be instantly interpreted, seized, and consumed. That is the power of the mysterious. It invites layers of interpretation, excites our imagination, seduces us into believing it conceals something marvelous. The world has become so familiar and its inhabitants so predictable that wraps itself in mystery will almost always draw the limelight to it and make us watch. Do not imagine that to create an air of mystery you have to be grand and awe-inspiring. Mystery that is woven into your day-to-day demeanor and is subtle has that much more power to fascinate and attract attention. Remember, most people are up front, can be read like an open book, take little care to control their words or image, and are hopelessly predictable. By simply holding back, keeping silent, and occasionally uttering ambiguous phrases, deliberately appearing inconsistent, and acting odd in the subtlest of ways, you will emanate an aura of mystery. People around you will then magnify that aura by constantly trying to interpret you. Both artists and con artists understand the vital link between being mysterious and attracting interest. Count Victor Lustig, the aristocrat of the Swindlers, played the game to perfection. He was always doing things that were different, or seemed to make no sense. He would show up to the best hotels in a limo driven by the Japanese chauffeur. No one had ever seen a Japanese chauffeur before, so this seemed exotic and strange. Lustig would dress in the most expensive clothing, but always with something, a medal, a flower, an armband, out of place, at least in conventional terms. This was not seen as tasteless, but as odd and intriguing. In hotels he would be seen receiving telegrams at all hours, one after the other, brought to him by a Japanese chauffeur, telegrams he would tear up with utter nonchalance. In fact, they were fakes, completely blank. He would sit alone in the dining room, reading a large and impressive-looking book, smiling at people yet remaining aloof. Within a few days, of course, the entire hotel would be abuzz with interest in this strange man. All this attention allowed Lustig to lure suckers in with ease. They would beg for his confidence and his company. Everyone wanted to be seen with the mysterious aristocrat, and in his presence of the distracting enigma, he wouldn't even notice that they were being robbed blind. An air of mystery can make mediocre appear intelligent and profound. It made Mata Hari, a woman of average appearance and intelligence, seem like a goddess, and her dancing divinely inspired. An air of mystery about an artist makes his or her artwork immediately more intriguing. A trick Marcel Duchamp played to great effect. It is all very easy to do. Say little about your work, tease and titillate with alluring, even contradictory comments, then stand back and let others try to make sense of it all. Mysterious people put others in a kind of inferior position, that of trying to figure them out. To degrees that they can control, they also elicit the fear surrounding anything uncertain or unknown. All great leaders know that an aura of mystery draws attention to them and creates an intimidating presence. Mao Tse-tung, for example, cleverly cultivated an enigmatic image. He had no worries about seeming inconsistent or contradicting himself. The very contradictoriness of his actions and words meant that all ways had the upper hand. No one, not even his own wife, ever felt they understood him, and he therefore seemed larger than life. This also meant that the public paid constant attention to him, ever anxious to witness his next move. If your social position prevents you from completely wrapping your actions in mysteries, you must at least learn to make yourself less obvious. Every now and then, act in a way that does not mesh with the other people's perception of you. This way you keep those around you on the defensive, eliciting the kind of attention that makes you powerful. Done right, the creation of enigma can also draw the kind of attention that strikes terror into your enemy. During the Second Punic War, the great Carthaginian general Hannibal was wreaking havoc in the march on Rome. Hannibal was known for his cleverness and duplicity. Under his leadership, Carthage's army, though smaller than those of the Romans, had constantly outmaneuvered them. On one occasion, though, Hannibal's scouts made a horrible blunder, leading his troops into a marshy terrain with the sea at their back. The Roman army blocked the mountain passes that led inland, and its general, Fabius, was ecstatic. It worked on a plan to destroy Hannibal's forces, but in the middle of the night the sentries looked down to see a mysterious sight. A huge procession of lights was heading up the mountain. Thousands and thousands of lights. If this was Hannibal's army, it had suddenly grown 100-fold. The sentries argued heatedly about what this could mean. Reinforcements from the sea? Troops that had been hidden in the area? Ghosts? No explanation was made sense. As they watched, fires broke out all over the mountain, and a horrible noise drifted up from them below, like the bellowing of a million horns. Demons, they thought. The sentries, the bravest and most sensible in the Roman army, fled their post in a panic. By the next day, Hannibal escaped from the marshland. What was his trick? Had he really conjured up demons? Actually, what he had done was ordered bundles of twigs to be fastened to the horns of the thousands of oxen that traveled with his troops and the beasts of burden. The twigs were then lit, giving the impression of torches of a vast army heading up the mountain. When the flames burned down the oxen's skin, the stampede in all directions, bellowing like mad and setting fires all over the mountainside. The key to this device's success was not the torches, the fires, or the noises themselves. However, but the fact that Hannibal had created a puzzle that captivated the sentries' attention and gradually terrified them. From the mountaintop, there was no way to explain the bizarre sight. If the sentries could have explained it, they would have stayed in their post. If you find yourself trapped, cornered, or on the defensive in some situation, try a simple experiment. Do something that cannot be easily explained or interpreted. Choose a simple action, but carry it out in a way that unsettles your opponent. A way with many possible interpretations, making your intentions obscure. Don't just be unpredictable, although this can be tactic can be accessible. See Law 17. Like Hannibal, create a scene that cannot be read. There will seem to be no method to your madness, no rhyme or reason, no single explanation. If you do this right, you will inspire fear and trembling, and the sentries will abandon their post. Call it the feigned madness of Hamlet tactic. The Hamlet uses it to great effect in the Shakespeare's play, frightening his stepfather Claudius. The mysterious of his behavior. The mysterious makes your forces seem larger, your power more terrifying. Image. The dance of the veils. The veils envelop the dancer. What they reveal causes excitement. What they conceal heightens interest. The essence of mystery. Reversal. In the beginning of your rise to the top, you must attract attention at all costs. But as you rise higher, you must constantly adapt. Never wear the public out of the same tactic. An air of mystery works wonders for those who need to develop an aura of power to get themselves noticed, but it must seem measured and under control. Matahari went too far with her fabrications. Although the accusation that she was a spy was false, at the time it was a reasonable presumption because all of her lives had been seen suspicious and nefarious. Do not let your air of mystery be slowly transformed to a reputation for deceit. The mystery you create must seem a game, playful and unthreatening. Recognize that when it goes too far, and pull back. There are times when the need for attention must be deferred, and when scandal and notoriety are the last things you want to create. The attention you attract must never offend or challenge the reputation of those above you, not, at any rate, if they are secure. You will seem not only paltry, but desperate for comparison. There is an art to knowing when to draw, notice, and when to withdraw. Lola Montez, one of the great practitioners of the art of attracting attention. She managed to rise from a middle-class Irish background to being the lover of France Lise and the mistress, the political advisor of King Ludwig of Bavaria. In her later years, though, she lost her sense of proportion. In London in 1850, there was to be a performance of Shakespeare's Macbeth featuring the greatest actor of the time, Charles John Keene. Everyone of the consequence in English society was to be there. It was rumored that even Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were to make a public appearance. The custom of the period demanded that everyone be seated before the Queen arrived, so the audience got there a little early, and when the Queen entered her royal box, they observed the convention standing up and applauding her. The royal couple waited, then bowed. Everyone sat down and lights were dim. Then suddenly, all eyes turned to the box opposite to Queen Victoria's. A woman appeared from the shadows, taking her seat later than the Queen. It was Lola Montez. She wore a diamond tiara on her dark hair and a long fur coat over her shoulders. People whispered in amazement at her mere cloak, which draped to reveal this low-necked gown of crimson velvet. By turning their heads, the audience could see that the royal couple deliberately avoided looking at Lola's box. They followed Victoria's example, and for the rest of the evening, Lola Montez was ignored. After that evening, no one in fashionable society dared to be seen with her. All her magnetic powers were reversed. People would flee her sight. Her future in England was finished. Never appear overly greedy for attention, then, for it signals insecurity, and insecurity drives power away. Understand that there are times when it is not your interest to be the center of attention. When in the presence of a king or queen, for instance, or the equivalent thereof, bow and retreat to the shadows. Never compete.